What we're talking about is the St. Patrick's Day promotion, and it's really a combination of a basic promotion, but also just kind of explaining some of the major characteristics that should be incorporated with any promotion. And we've added a few more than what we typically do, some key components, and obviously the more key components you do and the more effective you do them, the more effective the campaign is. So having said that, typically, remember, we're always going to want to leverage national events. And so St. Patrick's Day is a national event, and we always want to have an in-office promotion every month. And so this is the St. Patrick's Day promotion. And remember, we talked about there's five major categories of getting business with marketing, which is the introductions, which are where there's high trust and there's higher need. And then we talked about active referrals, in other words, creating business as opposed to waiting it, creating referrals. And then passive referrals is just, giving enough service that it eventually comes in, but that's a very low percentage wise, but when it comes in, it's a high percentage. And we talked about there's a 75% chance of getting business with introductions. There's up to 55% chance with active passive referrals. And then it drops significantly if your marketing system is a lead system, down to 15% and down to 1% with cold call systems. And that's because of two major factors: low trust if you're in cold calls versus high trust if you're in an introduction. And then if there's actually a need for that product or service that you have. Where in an introduction you can find out, is there a need? Cold call, you don't even know at all. So those are the two characters. That's why we want to always make sure we're maximizing the value for the introductions. And there's really only 5 types of introduction marketing. After the existing client, there's the spouse, the children, there's what's called the circle of influence, which is, and we'll talk about that a little bit more, but the average person has 7 people in their circle of influence where there's higher trust, higher need, but also where that person's willing to actually do something. And that's a major factor versus what's called an outside circle of influence. So you have to know the difference, because it's 2 totally different marketing systems when it comes to active referrals. And we go into that in detail with referrals. And then there's the leads, which is only about 35% to cold call, 15% to cold calls, which is 1%. So the introduction systems are the spouse potential business. And remember, every one of these categories fits into the S curve. They're either an 8%er within the 12 months, or they're on the right side of that S curve. They're a 92%er, and 25% of them are not going to have a gateway, back or neck pain. And that leaves about, so you take out 25% from 92, and you're down around 68%, something like that. Well, 68% is a way bigger number than 8%, where advertising will only get to 8%, but educational sales will get can go into the 68% category. So there's way more opportunity in educational sales than advertising, if you know what you're doing. And so we talk about the spouse, the child, the circle of influence, and then your past patients, and then specifically of your past patients, your 20%ers, or what we call the VIPs. So we're paying a lot of attention to these 5 categories in marketing, because that's where the highest probability of business is going to be. So having said that, let's kind of walk through some of the specifics. So it would say something like this: win the leprechaun pot of gold. So we're leveraging off what people already know, which is St. Pat's Day. So we're just going to tie right in. And so that's why every month you're just tying in. And there's 6 major holidays, federal holidays, and 5 non-major holidays. Actually 6, so you got 12. So you got 12. So every month there's a particular holiday to tie in with your office promotions. So in this particular case, it's the leprechaun. So the title would be win the leprechaun pot of gold. So that'd be the title. Now remember, every time we do an office promotion, every month your office should look like the theme of that office. If it's St. Pat's Day, then your office should look like St. Pat's Day in all the caricatures and the posters and things like that. And we talk about just going out to Walmart or to a dollar store in just buying all these things that you can use every year. And we talked about make sure they don't have dates on them, so that way you don't have to throw them away. And then we talked about after that promotion's over with all those office, posters and stick-ons. And typically I'm talking about hard cardboard. It's like a thicker cardboard that you would tape on. And then you would just pull it back off and put it back into the box and use it again next year. And then you just have your boxes of all your office promotions every year. And so your office is themed. So your office should be themed. It should be a St. Patrick's Day theme. And, the more creative you can be, the better. And the best person to turn this over to is a high sanguine personality. And that's who should be part of your marketing assistant anyways, a high sanguine personality. The more outrageous almost, the better. People, remember, this is we want to create emotional experiences. And so most of the time, doctors are way too subtle. They're way too conservative, and they don't tap into the emotional, or they're afraid of doing a little bit of a paradigm shift. So streamers and banners and posters and all that thing are very important emotionally, because that's what makes people feel good. This should be a feel-good, visceral experience, and you're tying you're tying in with what they already know, and so it beats way more. It beats way more advertising dollar than you will ever do. There will always be people that know way more about any of these holidays than your office. Way more, always. So it'd be the win the leprechaun pot of gold. Refer friends or co-workers with joint or muscle pain. Now here's what's important here. Remember, one of the categories is who the target market is. You have to say specifically who you're targeting. The more specific you say who you're targeting, the more likelihood it will resonate within that individual's mind. So in this particular marketing promotion, we're not specifically targeting a spouse. We're not specifically targeting a child. Okay? We're specifically targeting friends and coworkers. Just like in the Valentine's Day promotion, we specifically targeted a spouse or significant other. That's very specific. Well, this is very specific. So this helps take that person's mentality to that category in a conscious reality. This is very important of who you say as a target. So if you don't say there's a target, it allows them to stay general and very subconscious. And then when that happens, the only people they will think of is the person who has a high sense of urgency. That's the only person that they will think of consciously if you stay generic in general. But the more specific you are, it drives into the unconscious arena. So this is targeted specifically to friends and coworkers. We are specifically going for the circle of influence of friends and coworkers. Now, if they had a spouse, son, daughter, whatever, uncle, would we allow them to use this promotion? Of course we would. We're not going to turn business down. We're never going to turn business down. But we're being specific with who we're talking to and about. Now, the gateway would be joint or muscle pain. So this particular gateway would be joint or muscle pain. And we want to throw in muscle pain, not just joint pain. Joint pain, remember, is the single largest disability. Remember, arthritis is the single largest disability. So you could even say in here, arthritis. You can even easily, arthritis, joint pain, muscle pain. Very easily, and that will resonate. There's a tremendous amount of people that have arthritis. Matter of fact, they will recognize arthritis way more than they will joint pain. So it would even maybe behoove you to even use the word arthritis or muscle. Now, our muscle pain, and the reason you say muscle pain is many people blame their problems, whether it's back pain or neck pain, and they'll typically say something like this: oh, it's just a muscle pain. Oh, it's just a muscle pull. And of course, doctors perpetuate this when they go to the doctors and they just say it's muscle tension or whatever, take these pills. So be aware of the word muscle, muscle spasm, muscle tension, muscle pain. Be highly aware that our target market in chiropractic routinely sees their problem as being muscle pain, even though it might be facet joint invocation, pinched nerve, it might be some disc pressure, some osteoarthritic changes. But that's not, they don't know this. They just say muscle pain. So that's the importance of using these words. And of course, these words are called gateways. And when. So that's the importance of this phrase right here. This is a targeted phrase to a targeted group and a targeted gateway. And the prize, and let's just talk about the top prize. And all it is, it's a drawing. Top winners. It's a drawing. Here it says it's a drawing. And this is a drawing is what this is for referrals. Essentially, it's people that offer referrals, and when they refer, depending on the number of people that they refer, their name goes into a fishbowl, and then there's drawings at the end for certain prizes. The more people they refer, then exponentially there's more tickets, which means exponentially there's a greater chance to win. That's the basis of this promotion specifically. But it's a fun thing to do that you tie in with your office. And so the top prize would be winner's choice of one of the following. And these are some good examples. One night stay in a nice hotel, maybe a Broadway ticket or a nice dinner. Now, I'm not going to say nice hotel in my flyer or in my promotion. I'm going to say specifically the name of the hotel. It might say the Marriott or the Hyatt. Okay, I'm not going to say nice hotel, and I'm not going to say nice dinner. I'm actually going to say dinner for two at, and it'd be a nicer restaurant. And I would even look up, and I wouldn't say Broadway tickets. I would say specifically. Now, just go if you have whatever Broadway is in your area. See what the next Broadway show is in the next 30 days, and then put that in here. So make it specific. So this might say the Marriott Hotel. This might say, Phantom of the Opera. And then this might say Ruth's Chris or, something, a nicer restaurant as opposed to a blue collar, a little bit more upscale. And I'm going to go into the meaning of this here. And then here's 1 month's paid gas would be at one, and then 1 month's paid electric bill. Now, remember, anytime we offer things like this, whether it's 1 month's paid this or 1 month's paid that, you always have to put in a limited amount, limited to a predetermined dollar amount. So in this case, I just put $200. Now, it might not be $200. You might want to do $1,000. You might want to do $50. So what is that number based on? Well, that number is going to be based on what you see as your potential. If you think you're only going to get 2 new patients, and that is kind of representative of, how your history, well, I'm not going to put in there $1,000. I'm going to base it on what I'm seeing as my history and my potential and my patient flow and volume and things of that nature. So that might not be 200. It might only be 100, in which some of this would be scaled back accordingly. So remember, what you're going to offer, the dollar amount is totally based on your potential, and then also what is your case average, and then what is your retention. See, if you don't have good case average and good retention, then you're going to have a lower number. But if I know I have an average of 25 patient retention and a $50 per visit, then I know easily at 25, what would that be at $50? If it was 10, 500, say that's 1,000, 2 times 5, that's 1,250 for one patient. So that's one patient is $1,250. And let's say I know I have the ability to easily get 5 patients. Well, I'm easily going to be able to say $200 here. Matter of fact, that'd probably be a low number for the statistics that I just talked about. If I know I have the ability to get 5 patients, and that kind of shows in my history and all that, and it's $1,200 per patient, Even if you took at 10%, that's 1,200, 12 times 5, 5, 6, 7. So you're at $700 if it was only 10%. If you were going to just give away 10%, so this is kind of a way to think about these numbers. It's always relative, so you don't want to just plug in a number. And remember, it also has to do with how busy you are. The busier I am, then the less I'm going to give away. In other words, the closer I get to maximizing my time for money, then the tighter my giveaways become, and the less lucrative they are. And when I'm not doing as well, if I'm seeing 20 visits, 30 visits, 40, 60 visits, then I'm going to open up the doors a little more. I'm going to loosen up the purse strings a little more and decrease the barriers to entry and the obstacles. So these are the factors that I'm going to consider. So not everybody, you can't just say everybody $200. It kind of depends on where you're at in your practice, your skill set, and your knowledge. And you should know kind of where you're at, depending with where we've been up to this point. Now, let me just make a couple comments. Let me finish these three gifts, and then let's talk about them here just a second. Now, well, I'll tell you what. This next one is a little in depth and can seem to be a little controversial. So before we go to that one, let me finish this one. So hopefully you understand when we came up here and we talked about tying in, the importance of tying in brand name recognition to what is already well known and actively going on in your community. That's the purpose of the tying an office promotion with what's going on in that month. Hopefully you understand and realize that you'll always have better name recognition than doing anything on your own. I see chiropractors create their own, and there's sold programs like this too. And you got to be careful because nobody knows about some things. Now, some things are self-explanatory just in the title. Like if you said Kids Day America, that's a chiropractic promotion. Well, that's somewhat self-explanatory in the title. But if it's something that's a chiropractic promotion that's not somewhat self-explanatory, then you're missing out on a tremendous amount of name recognition that they don't even know about. So this is the importance of always tying into with your monthly office promotions, your national events, what's going on nationally. So we talked about the importance of being very specific with who you go after. You cannot be general. Hopefully you've learned by now, the more general you stay, the less effective it's going to be. So specifically, and that goes not just to the conscious, but to the unconscious mind. And then we talked about the gateways, the importance of specifically saying something. And once again, we're tying into their conscious and unconscious versus staying general. Remember, it's always easier to think if you give me a menu versus you ask me an essay, ask me something open-ended. The natural response is to not expend energy or think and back off. And that's what you'll get. If you ask open-ended generic questions, you'll get path of least resistance and they will just back off and not respond, as opposed to highly specific factors and going in multiple resistances. That's when you'll laser in on the topic and the subject, as well as go from the conscious to the subconscious. So, and then the importance of staying within a gateway and not violating gateways. In other words, not saying something that's a violation of what is a natural perception of what you do. So that's the importance of that. Now, here we said winner's choice. Winner's choice. And that was a reason. There's a reason we said a choice here. And here's why. I'll just tell you who this ad is targeted. It is specifically targeted to your female audience. Your females are the ones that will participate in your emotional marketing way more than your men. And that's just generically, women are just generally more emotional than women. And so women, generally speaking, will participate with emotional marketing. And this is an emotional marketing. This is an emotional event. It's St. Patrick's Day. It's not a cognitive event. And so you will have women that will participate more. So the target market in your audience for referrals and to play this game, in other words, to play and get involved with the referral game, are women. Now you need to know that. Now, not only do you need to know that, but you need to know what category of women. And this is where it becomes very important that you know who your 20%ers are. This is a circle of influence introduction for the women in your office and their circle of influence. Women care more. And I'm making general assumptions, I know that. But women care more about their friends. And I'm talking about circle of influence. Circle of influence, not outside of the circle of influence. Women will care more about their girl-friend, their girl-coworker. Women will care more than the man's perceptions, especially in this culture where man, should be strong and do it on his own and blah, blah, blah. So at the risk of violating every political correctness statement there is and going straight to the reality, that's what we're going to do. We're going to talk real. So that's why also this is set up this way. Okay? So if we're targeting women, that's why we're going to say one night stay in the Marriott Hotel and a Broadway ticket and this nice dinner, because that will appeal to a heck of a lot more women. That will appeal to like close to 0 men. A Broadway ticket will not appeal to very many men. So you have to be highly aware of what you're doing and who your market is and what you're giving and valuing, and not just think and be generic, okay, and everybody. So the reason I'm saying one night stay in a nice hotel. Guess how many women would like to get their men who they've been with in a while on a one night stay to have some love, appreciation, and recognition in a nice hotel with Broadway tickets and a nice dinner. Go ahead and put that in front of 10 women, and how many of them would love to force their spouse to pay attention to them for 24 hours. So that's the appeal of this. And it's specifically directed toward, this is a high emotional category. And it's specifically directed toward the women in your office, but more specifically the 20%ers. That's who we're going after. I mean, you just need to be highly aware of who this is. So once again, you should know who your 20%ers are who are coming in the next 2 weeks. And as well as when this promotion goes out, I'm going to make sure that this, and we'll talk about this just down the road here a little bit, but I'm going to make sure that they know that. Now, this goes back to, remember 87% of the bills in a household are paid by women. 87%. Men generally make the major purchase decisions. Are they okay the major purchase decisions? The daily, weekly, and monthly, 87% are taken care of by the women. Now, the woman will know what the gas bill is, or what the for your either the house or the car. The woman will know what the electric bill is for the house. She's the one that's paying it overwhelmingly. Statistically, that's not my opinion. That's a factual statistic. Now, also, that's a pain-based motivator. So this is a pleasure-based, really nice, a pleasure-based, highly romantic, emotional ticket. And I guarantee you this, probably 8 of the 10 women who win this, the men won't even go. She'll end up taking her girlfriend. That's what will happen. The men will bail out. So this 1 month's paid gas, when I say gas, I'm talking about car gas. Now, depending on where you're at, you could make it home. But remember, none of this matters because we've tied it to a financial limit. You go, well, why don't we just say $200? Because there's absolutely no appeal in $200. There's absolutely no emotional appeal for you to give a gift certificate of $200. And that's the worst gift you can ever give is money. Remember, of the categories of gift, what you do for money is the worst thing you do. Second to the worst is a personal gain, and then it starts going into senses or conviction and duty. So that's the hierarchy of why you'll do things. So money is the worst thing you can do because it carries no emotional appeal. I almost always tell my doctors, never give money. Never get. I mean, the only time you give money is when somebody's in survival and they need the money to make their own choice. And that typically doesn't involve anything we do in a chiropractic office, whether it's bonuses with staff or with anybody. So it's limited to a pre-dollar amount. So all we're doing is tying every one of these to a dollar amount. But let me tell you, this is way more appealing to read this than as you say a $200 gift certificate. Because they don't think like this. They don't think, well, I could go to a Broadway ticket and I could go to dinner with my husband and go and stay in a nice hotel one night. They don't. That's not how they're thinking. So that's why. And then here's the other one. The other thing about giving them some options here, it increases the opportunity. So all we're doing is increasing the potential opportunity, where this is a nice pleasure-based emotional response, and this is more of a pain relief response. So we got pleasure and pain relief and high emotional. And the reason this is, believe it or not, this can be high emotional. If they're month to month and the bills are tight for paying for their gas or their electric bill, then this becomes a highly motivating factor to that individual. And you'll see it. You'll even have people even say that, that, man, I need that. I need some help with my electric bill this month or whatever. You'll have people actually say that. So that's the psychology behind this prize. Now, let me just put it on hold for a second and let's address those issues. Now, let's go to the next topic in this promotion. And I'm going to say it and then I want to come back to it because it can be controversial. So I want to say it and then come back to it. Now, what if we also gave a $20 credit toward the patient's deductible for each referral? Now, don't be yelling and screaming just yet. Let me explain how that is legal and ethical, how that works. Because the first question I get when I say something like this, a $20 credit toward referral, is, can you do that? Is it legal? That's the first thing that everybody screams and yells. So put your seatbelt on, hang tight, and we're going to cover this. And we're going to cover this topic because the answer to that question is the answer to all promotions and discounts. Not just this one. Any promotion or discount you have, I'm going to give you the answer to the money question. So, and of course, that's if they scheduled and came in. Now, the $20 credit would apply if that person helps you in the administrative function of sending out an offer, in other words, a coupon offer in the mail, or a follow-up phone call. In other words, they help you get the person's name, address, and phone number. They help you. Okay? That's what it's predicated on. If they don't help you get that person's number, by the way, the person also has to come in. Okay? So that's how it's predicated. Now, having said that, and all we would do is give them a $20 credit slip. We'd put the patient's name on it. So an example would be $20 credit applied to a copay for. Now, this is a key word. Administrative help. For scheduling the patient. Signed, you would just sign it and the deadline. That's it. That's all it would be. It's just a little, and all I'm really talking about here is the little things you get at Office Depot, receipts. All it would be is just a money receipt. That's all it is. You can get money receipt books at Office Depot. And that's all it would say. $20 credit applied to the copay for administrative help scheduling that patient. Sign it and date it. That's it. And it could be used for those purposes. Now, let me talk about this, let me come back to the second one. So the second prize would be 2 drawings. And a classic example is like 1 hour massage. So the 2 other drawings might be a 1 hour massage each. And then there would be a free prize for everybody who participates. What's the definition of participate? Participate is if they've referred somebody in. If they gave you a name and they came in, that's participate. So I'm going to give them a free prize. So let me go back and cover each one of these. First of all, this one's easy. So the first drawing, or one drawing, would be for the top prize, which was this. The second drawing would be for 2 massages, 1 each. And these would be hour-long massages. They would be hour-long massages, not 25-minute, or the 55-minute or 50-minute, not the 20, 25-minute. Okay? So that's what that would be. Now, if you didn't have massage in your office, there's other options. You just talk to me about it, and we can do that. It's very easy to substitute this or even get a discount from a local person that gives massage and ask for a discount. And I cover that in another format. And then the free prize. So what free prize would everybody get? Well, all we're doing here is just creating participation. Remember, this is the biggest word in marketing, free. So all we're wanting to do is offer something to everybody. Now, we won't necessarily say what it is. It just says free, and actually this would be a free gift. This would be a free gift for everybody that participates. Okay? And everybody likes something free. So at least they're getting something, even so they know that if they participate, even if they don't win, they get something. And so that's how that works. Now, what are the easiest free gifts to get? All you do is you get a theme. And what's the easiest way to get the free gifts that I talk about? Remember, when I say free gift, I'm not talking about a high dollar gift when we talk about the trinket gifts. And that's really what we're talking about, is the trinket gift. The trinket gift. Not even sure if that's how you spell it. Trinket gift. And so when we say trinket gift, what are we talking about? We're talking about just a really simple thing that's very, very inexpensive that you can just hand out to everybody. An example of a trinket gift is the pin, when you give out pins that are crooked or whatever. Now, I don't recommend giving the crooked pin out, but that's a trinket gift. That's something really inexpensive. Now, the best place to get a trinket gift is the dollar store, those stores where things cost $1, or the local teacher's supply store, the local teacher's supply store. And I said, when you go to the trinket store, all you would do is pick up a gift relative to that particular holiday, St. Patrick's Day. They got all kinds of stuff in there that is that you can very easily buy, very cheap. And remember, when I go in there, what I look for is what theme is being marketed, and then all I do is I'll pay $1 for something. But remember, I told you, when you go in there, try to buy something where there's 2 or 4 in a pack for $1. Now, don't give the patient all 4 or all 2. They get 1. Remember, it's not the value of the gift. It's the gift. That's what's important. And a lot of times, if they don't use it, they'll give it to their kids or something like that. And just gifts. People like gifts, even if they don't use them. They just, remember, it's the law of reciprocity. So that's how easy it is to get a trinket gift for all your patients for St. Patrick's Day. So if there's like 2 in a unit, whatever that is, relative to that holiday, then, if you spent $20, you'd have 40 gifts. Well, all you do is you take up your active patients. How many patients are coming in that are active? And then I always say buy an extra 20% for additional that may come in, because you don't run out unless you put a limited amount on trinket gifts. And with this, we would not put a limit on a trinket gift. So anybody that participated in the program, in the referral program, we want them to know they're going to get something. Okay, so let's come back up to here, the $20 credit, this. And let's explain how this works. the legality and all that stuff, is can you pay for referrals? No. Can you, what you have to do is what's called office policy. Now this is very important, what I'm getting ready to tell you, is you can do a lot of things, but it has to be what's called an office policy. Now what does that mean, office policy? Office policy means it has to be written down. It can't be metaphysical in the air. So you should have a sheet of paper that says discounts and promotions. And on there, it says office policy for discounts and promotions. That's what you should have. And you have a couple phrases in there. And here's the key that you need to remember is, number one, it has to be a policy. Number two, it has to be written down. It has to be known. In other words, you have to let your staff know. It can't be hidden and nobody know about it. It's just like your manual. When you train your staff on the hours you open and close and everything else, well, they should also know basic office policies with discounts and promotions. So, office policy. Now, what I'm really talking about is the legal side right now. That's what I'm talking about right now. So, what makes it legal or what makes it illegal or when does it create problems? Well, here's how and why. If it's not a policy, it'll be a problem. Number two, if it's not written down, it'll be a problem. Number three, you have to offer it to the insurance company also. So it's not just for the patient. Now, the next question I typically get is, do I have to proactively send this and mail this to, or call all the insurance companies and let them know? No. But it is an office policy. Would you be willing to give a $20 credit toward the insurance and discount toward the insurance and the company for any potential referral that they had to your business? If you're okay with that being an office policy, then write it down. Now, what is the likelihood of that happening? What's the likelihood of an insurance company actually referring you business and getting a $20 discount? Well, it's slim to none. It's not going to happen. So it has to be whatever it is you offer to the patient relative to a discount or promotion, you have to offer it to the insurance company. But does that mean you have to write, unless your state law says otherwise, unless your state law says any discount that you give to a patient has to be mailed to the insurance company, then that's a different game. I only know of one state right now that's like that. There could be others. I only know of one. So it just has to be a policy. It has to be written down, and it can't just be to the patient. So are you willing to give that discount to the insurance company for a referral? Sure. If you're not, then don't do this promotion. Here's the other one. It has to be for something, and it can't be for the referral. In other words, are we paying them $20 for the referral? No. We're paying them $20 for their administrative help in scheduling the patient. That's what we're paying them for. When we ask them to help us get a name, phone number, or address. And the only reason you would do that is if you're going to call them or mail them a coupon. That's the only reason you really do that. Now, if you're not going to mail them a coupon and you're not going to call them, then don't do it. This is how simple this gets. Also, so what is the $20 for? Is it for the referral? No. It says right here on what you're going to give them, the receipt you're going to give them is going to say, it's for their administrative help. In other words, they're going above and beyond to help you. In other words, would you pay somebody else administratively to help you do something? Well, yeah, you'd have to or they wouldn't do it. Thirdly, or wherever we're at in the list, it has to be commensurate with what is average or normal. In other words, you couldn't pay somebody $1,000 for something that might take 2 seconds and your staff member could do it. So if you took 2 seconds out of a staff member's, $14, $15 hourly wage, what would that equal out to? In other words, it's totally not even commensurate. So would it be somewhat commensurate for the amount of effort or difficulty or time involved? Effort, difficulty, or time involved. Well, how much easier is it going to be for you to have them help you get a name, address, and phone number versus you. Well, you may never get it. So it may not even be available for you, or you could look it up and try this and that, but you may never get that information. So effort doesn't take a lot. It does take some effort. Difficulty, high degree of difficulty. Time involved, some time involved. So these are the points relative to discounts and promotions. Effort, time, degree of difficulty, has to be relevant to the monetary compensation, has to be somewhat relevant, and so it's for admin, and you have to have a policy, and then a policy has to be across the board. You're not cherry picking patients. You're not leaving out insurance companies. It's not a policy, and you're not paying for patients. That's not what's happening here. It's administrative help, the time and effort for that patient to sit down and go with you to get the person's name, address, and phone number for follow-up marketing. And it's an office policy, and you're going to apply it toward their copay. And if the insurance company, it's a policy for the patient and the insurance company. Does that mean you have to proactively notify the insurance company? No, unless it's your state law. And so these are the main factors when it comes to money and policies and insurance and law. And you may have a specific law relative in your state, but these are the major considerations when you're talking about discounts and promotion. When you're talking about money, and relative to money. Also, that's also why this is a drawing. See, this is a drawing. It is not you do this and get that per se. It's for the effort involved. So it's a drawing. That's why it's not like the person who gives the most patients is the leader. See, that would be a problem. That would be inferred as buying patients. That's what that would easily be inferred as. But because it's a drawing, you're not buying patients. There's randomness involved here. That's the purpose of the drawing relative to this whole factor here. So that's what I wanted to just take a few points on relative to if, that is if. Now, if you feel uncomfortable about offering a $20 credit as a part of a motivation to help stimulate referral and utilize that person's time, effort, energy, and degree of difficulty getting this information, if you have any trouble with any of that, creating an office policy, then here's my suggestion. Do not offer it. Do not do it. Just don't do it. It's no big deal. And you'll see why. So it does not even have to be offered. It's no big deal. Okay? So once again, let me just put it on hold here and do any follow-up questions. Okay, so we're moving forward here with, we talked about another incentive. So we're talking about the motivations for the patient and the incentives and things like that. And we'll kind of wrap it up to make it all seem relevant and simple. So that is, and then here's the extra one. There's an extra gift for the first 7 patients who refer. And so they would get something. Now, typically right here, you might just throw in a cervical pillow, something like that. And that's pretty much what I'd probably do. So the first 7. Now, what are we doing here? There's an extra gift for the first 7. What law of marketing are we using here? This is called scarcity. So we're still using a limit, but we're using it in a different way. So we're limiting the gift, but it's for the first 7 patients who actually receive a free, say, cervical pillow. Okay. Now, obviously, you can put anything here almost, and you just want to make it valuable to the customer. But would I be willing to help stimulate? And you can even put in here a free extra massage, or a free massage, or just something for their time and effort, in other words. So that's what you can do here. And what are we trying to do? We're trying to get people to start acting. We're using the law of scarcity, saying, hey, there's going to be some extra juju on the plate here for the first people who get off their butt and actually do something. That's what we're trying to do here, okay? Now, here's another component. Double the referrals, double your chances. And so what happens is, and all we're doing is we're backloading this with emotional triggers. We're backloading this with emotional triggers. So if it's one referral, they would get one entry into the drawing, the fishbowl drawing. If they get 3 referrals, in other words, it would double. However many referrals that they gave, you would double the amount of potential entries. So the more that they refer, it's not proportional. In other words, it's not a one-to-one relationship. And we don't want it to be that way. Because remember the 80-20 rule. There's going to be a small number of people that actually refer the majority of people. There's only going to be 1 to 3 people that's going to refer you 80% of these people, roughly. I mean, that's what's going to happen. 80% of your new patients are going to come from basically 3 people. The clue is to find out who those 3 people are going to be, but you already have a high target probability by going to females and your 20%ers, especially if it's a 3%er. That's who your top 3 people are going to be. That's going to give you 80% of this business right here. So this is just another emotional trigger. So whatever number of referrals they get, they double the number of entries past 1. So if they give 2 referrals, they get 4 entries. If they give 3, it's 6. 4, it's 8. 5, it's 10. So they get double the amount of potential going into the fishbowl to win the pot of gold drawing. Okay, so that's how that works. And of course, you always want a deadline. So the deadline is the 17th, St. Patrick's Day. They must come in by the 17th because you can't have people just scheduled on the book. Okay, can't be scheduled on the book. And you could say the patient must come in by, and you could change this date. Let's say if you even said 24, say a week later, you wouldn't want to go more than a week later. And say if that was the 24th, that'd be the 7th. So they'd have 1 week after the deadline to actually come in, but you can't actually start pulling prizes until real bodies have showed up. And now you know if it's a valid entry or not. Okay. So you definitely want a deadline. That's another major category of a promotion, a deadline. End of business day. Okay, so they must come in. So the deadline could be the 17th, and they must come in, just give a few day leadway. You know, I wouldn't do no more than a week. I'd probably do 5 days, something like that. And then who's the target market? Your target market, I already told you, is the circle of influence. It's the circle of influence. Now, if I know this, I know who I'm going to pay attention to. I'm not just going to randomly be generic. I'm not going to be general. I'm going to be specific in my vocabulary and words and specifically talk about certain people. So what's going to be the gateway? So we talked about the importance of having a gateway. So arthritic joint pain and our muscle pain. And again, that's not a paradigm shift. It's a gateway, and it's a massive amount of people. What's the message? What's the USP? Can chiropractic help your joint pain or muscle pain? So that would be the USP, the unique sales position. Okay, try chiropractic at the doctor's expense. All right, so what's the offer? So the offer, I would do free examination. This is, and again, we talked about the differences with offers depending on where you're at in your business. If you're lower business, my offer is going to be better. If my business is higher, it's going to be tighter. So it totally depends on where you're at in your business, if your offer is going to be a lower barrier to entry or a tighter barrier to entry. And an example would be if you were seeing 150 visits a week and you knew 150, 160, and you already know you're gonna max out at let's say maybe 180, 200, then you may even want to do this and charge a small amount for it to help increase the possibility of those people actually coming in. So, and of course, this would be, there's always a bonus. So we're going to offer a bonus. So remember, when we make an offer, we're going to, remember, buffet offers always work better than a la carte offers. A la carte is like just a free exam or free x-ray or whatever. So when you package it, so a simple package here might be the free examination, 2 x-rays if needed, 1 treatment, and the bonus, 1 tube of biofreeze. And I'd even put in there, let me see the bonus I put here. Okay. And remember, what's the purpose of a bonus? The bonus is the supercharger. So the offer should say, yes, it's worth it. And the bonus should say, that's damn well worth it. The bonus is used to supercharge it. Okay? And typically, you would limit the bonus. The bonus would be limited. So you would limit it, and again, all we're trying to do here is tap into scarcity, the law of scarcity, and get them to act now versus later. So we'll tie the law of scarcity to the bonus. Okay, and then also we talked about value. Anytime you offer something, you would put in the value. So if this was, let's say, examination, let's say the exam was, I don't know, let's say $50, whatever your, and just say the value here would be 2 x-rays, so let's say 150, and then let's say a treatment would be, say, 50. Okay, so the total value would be 200. So remember, we talked about the importance of showing the value of what you're offering to make it conscious and aware, and that helps increase, well, we're just increasing the value is what we're doing. So we're lowering the obstacles and increasing the perceived value. So anytime we offer something, we want to say what the value is. Now, one of the mistakes you can make by putting the value in is over-exaggerating the value, and I see that a lot of times. When people see, when you put a dollar figure towards something and it's not really relevant, in other words, you shot for a real high point for that, now you start violating trust. So don't overshoot the value. Don't do that. So this is kind of a classic example right there of, and these are main points in marketing. We will use, and we've already used a lot of these points before. And I just wanted to pay particular emphasis on the importance of these points relative to the emotional, psychological, conscious, and subconscious target market to increase the effectiveness. Now, let's go into some of the major must. Well, we want a fishbowl at the front. So, I mean, pick up a fishbowl at Walmart and, for the visual aids. So we want visual aids that are self-explanatory. And we put the fish, You always want, when you do these marketing things, you always want them to be interruptive in the path of the patient. If you put this stuff out of the way, out of where patients go, most of them will come in and you're out of your office and never even see this stuff. So we like to put it where it's interruptive. Like the fishbowl is going to be right next to where we sign in. We want to interrupt their normal line of communication when we're doing a promotion. So that's the visual aid. We talked about the St. Patrick's Day office displays, tying the leprechaun. I'm just going to put the, the leprechaun part of gold. All of you've seen a little leprechaun with a part of gold. You can buy those cardboard, outlines anywhere, Walmart, whatever. And I'm just going to have it next to the offer. Now, typically, I'm going to have the sign-up sheet on the counter of who they're signing up. And again, all we're doing here is increasing the commitment, because remember, we're going to do what's called a third-party booking. We'd rather have these people they're referring to come in with who they know. It's much easier for them to come in with who they know than to come into a foreign place with nobody. So it's much more difficult to get these people to come in by themselves as opposed to with their friend. So we like to do what's called a third-party book, bring them in when that patient's coming in. So the sign-up sheet helps increase the commitment. The patient should sign them up and a tentative time when they're going to be bringing them in. When the patient signs, it increases their commitment, not the staff member. In other words, we would not want the staff member, when do you think you're going to come in, and then the staff member sign it in. No, we would prefer to have the patient, and we will say tentatively, because the patient can't say, I can definitely do this without talking to the other person. So we go for what's called a tentative agreement, tentative time agreement. And the patient signs it. It helps increase the commitment. And then a whiteboard showing the leaders. Now this is huge. This is huge. You're tapping into some real psychology and drive here. And so put the leaders, and you want a whiteboard. And we talk about the different structures of an office, and one of the main components in an office is a whiteboard announcing all the promotions and what's going on. Well, in that this is the whiteboard you're going to use. And what you want is put the name. Now, we won't put the last name. It'd be like Pat L. We don't want to violate HIPAA. And then you put at the top, the leprechaun drawing leaders, and meaning how many people they referred. And this is huge. When they come in, the leaders will start to get competitive. And they'll come in seeing who the leader, who do they got to beat? How many more do they need? And you'll sometimes, we've had this where two people just go at it, and they come in every time to see if they're still in the lead or not. And then they go out and get a few more referrals. This is huge. Visual, bored, egocentric, narcissistic. This is huge. Have the leaderboard. Who's on the leaderboard? We want it to be competitive. We want to find out who the competitors are. So the whiteboard shows the leaders. So it would just say their name, the referral leaders, and it would just say like John, Pat L, 3. Referrals, 3. Joe L, 2. That's how it would look on the leaderboard. And then every day your staff member just updates the leaderboard with the referrals. That's it. And of course, you have to ask, because if you don't do any of this, you get 8%. You get 8% divided by 12 years, divided by 12 months, and that's not a big number if you don't even ask. So if you wait around and do not even ask anybody to go into what we call the lost majority. So where's the majority of this business going to come from? It's going to come from the category that I call the lost majority, the 92%. It's not going to come from the 8%, all these people waiting around looking for a chiropractor. You'll tap into a few of those, 1 or 2, whatever. That's a low number. If you do not realize it yet by doing these promotions, you have to ask to go into the lost majority. And remember, the lost majority has the problem. All we're trying to do here is decrease the obstacles. Remember, there's the need relative to the obstacles. Well, I haven't addressed the need yet. When we go into educational sales, we're going to nail that plus the obstacles. Right now, all we're doing is lowering the barrier to entry with the obstacles. That's all we're doing. And that's the timer money equation, specifically money equation. So that's what we're doing here, and plus using a lot of other emotional triggers and psychological frames. But when we actually start going to educational sales, these promotions will routinely include a little educational sales component to establish need, as well as the discount, and that lever will significantly increase the number of people. That'll happen here shortly. And then we talked about the importance of asking questions in a state of three, from open-ended, closed-ended to a negative reverse. And we talked about the importance of that relative to getting past the second resistance. If you don't get past the second resistance, getting past the second resistance will increase your opportunity 50%. 50%. Now this has to be trained in. You know, I had one doctor train in all of this to staff. You know, he talked about the resistances and the second resistance, and he talked about confrontation and fear of rejection. He taught all this in. And because it was high on his staff's awareness, they came out in the attack mode. That's what they did. In the last in-office promotion, they had, I think it was 14 new patients from one in-office promotion, and it didn't cost them anything. 14. And that was from all of these things that he did a good job of training in. So we talked about going past the second resistance. These are people that they're not just waiting around to come in to see you. We talked about the importance of multiple times in the office, from the front desk girl to the doctor to the back, because their consciousness and awareness comes up every time it's addressed. We talked about multiple times per patient in that 2-week span. And we talked about the importance of repetition, and the majority of the patients will typically sign up within the last 3 to 4 days of the promotion. And it has to do with contact, follow-up. That's where it's at. So these are all important. So how important is it to know these things to tie into the 92% market, specifically in this promotion, the females, the 20%ers, going past the second resistance, the gateways of arthritic pain and muscle pain. And we talked about past resistance. See, there's a lot of factors here, and they all start adding up to increase the effectiveness. And of course, when you don't do them, or the less effective you do them, then you start scaling back toward only getting the market forces, the 8%. And so the higher the skill level, the better the knowledge. Now it becomes much, much greater and much, much more effective. And so it builds. That's why these promotions should be building, where maybe you weren't as good on the first one or second one or third. But each time you should be learning and applying and getting a little more confidence. And that's what happens each time you do a promotion. So we talked about the importance of getting the patient's name. We talked about the importance of asking about the type of problem. Now we'll go a little bit more into this when we do educational sales, but what's the purpose of getting the patient's name? Personalizing it. What's the purpose of getting the patient's problem? Personalizing it and creating pain-based motivation. Third party, remember these people, because we're going to the circle of influence, remember these people are willing and wanting to help. And they will go out of their way because it's within the circle of influence. And if you've got somebody that's outside of their circle of influence, they will not. And so you cannot do many of these techniques when you're going outside the circle of influence, because they're not willing to spend the time or energy to go there with you. So we talked about focusing on the 20%, the 20%ers. That should be percenters. And being more educated and smart with your decision making and your marketing. We talked about that. Instead of just randomly doing things, especially the 3%ers. And of course, we send, this is a promotion in office, but we also send it video email, and we use the 3-step formula, right? The 3-step formula with the video email. If it's a 2-week promotion, remember it goes out at the beginning of the week, and then typically the Thursday of that week it'll go out, and then typically the Tuesday it'll go out, or it'll go out at the beginning of the week, the following week, that Monday, and then that Wednesday. And remember, you're always going to connect the dots. Anytime you send out a sequence, you always connect the dots and reference the previous one. So, in the headline, it would say what the promotion is, and the second one would say second notice. The third one would say last notice. Always connect the dots. It increases the consciousness and awareness. And your marketing assistant should have a list of who's coming in that day, specifically being highly aware of who your 20%ers are coming in that day, and especially your 3%ers. I'm going to pay a little more attention to those people because they're going to go to bat for you. Now, you could call the 20%ers. If you get the phone number, you could call. I'm not going to suggest you do that right now because that includes educational sales. And so I'll teach you the script that your staff member can actually make phone calls and talk to these people and increase their motivation. But in this particular event, I don't suggest that you do get their, right now, go for the name or their address. I don't suggest you necessarily do it with where we're at right now. But once we know educational sales and combine it with our discount offer, then definitely your numbers will go up even more once there's a call made to help establish need. So remember, the business will come in from your circle of influence after multiple and vertical contacts using the gateways. So some important marketing factors, remember, we had a target market. It wasn't just random. We're going after friends and coworkers, and we're saying it. We're going after introductions where there's high trust and high probable need. And that's called the active referral category also in the circle of influence. So we target everybody. We're going to target everybody, but especially the 20%ers and definitely the 3%ers. The importance of using a gateway. We talked about the importance of non-paradigm shifts in your marketing and actually saying something and not being generic. That increases high specificity within that particular person. And we talked about the prize or gift for the potential patient, referring patient, and all we're doing is lowering the barrier to entry. So we talked about the limits. Limits affect greed and create action when you have limits, whether it's a limit in the first amount of people that refer or limits with the new patients coming in with bonuses. The importance of always putting a limit on something. And then we talked about the importance of a deadline. And all of these create action instead of letting people, because remember what happens. Every 24 hours, motivation decreases 50%. So remember, life happens every day. So something that was a priority to you maybe on last Monday, 3 days later, maybe is not even on your conscious radar. So motivation decreases 50% every 24 hours. So we got to remember, that's why we want action steps and deadlines. And we talked about where to get these cheap gifts and prizes. And I already told you the dollar store is the best way, and pay $1 and get 4 units of whatever it is, or the teacher's store. And when it comes to gifts and prizes, by far a simple dollar store for little freebie trinkets is the absolute easiest way. So this is an example of what the flyer may look like here. And it would be, obviously, it would be green paper. It's a St. Patty's Day promotion. So I'm going to buy green paper. And I would just have the black ink printed off on green paper. So it'd be something like this: to win the Leprechaun Gold Drawing, refer friends, coworkers, for joint muscle pain, win, free gift for all participants, top prize, winner's choice, one night's hotel, Broadway tickets, dinner, 1 month's gas paid, 1 month's electric paid, second prize, 2 drawings, 1 hour massage. Referring patients also receive, and if you don't want to do it, don't do it, take it out, $20 credit per deductible credit per referral. First 7 patients receive maybe a cervical pillow. First 7 referring patients receive maybe a cervical pillow. Double your chances with double, 1 referrals, 1 entry, 3 referrals, 6 entries. So that's their motivation. The motivation for the offer is, now remember, what's the real motivation here? It's really that they trust, know, and like somebody. That's the real motivation, and they're willing to help. That's the real motivation. This is all extra. If you were outside the circle of influence, this will not work. This has to be with somebody who already knows, like, and trusts somebody that has a problem. In other words, we're tapping into their human drive of wanting to help somebody. Not just somebody, but somebody they care about. So, second prize drawing, 1 hour massage, two drawings, 1 hour massage, referring, we covered that. So the free offer for the patients, co-workers, or friends include free examination, 2 x-rays if needed, 1 free, 1 treatment, bonus, free 1 tube of bowel freeze, or bonus free 1 St. Patrick's Day gift, deadline and drawing, end of business day, March 21st. That's just kind of a classic. I'll email this out to you. You can tweak it as you want. It's a Word document, so if you wanted to tweak it a little bit. But that's kind of what the flyer would look like.